So, Steve, session description protocol files, SDP, yet another acronym for us all to get familiar with. Now, these are incredibly important, aren't they, in the world of NMOS?
Yes, they are. They define everything that is going to happen in connecting to a new source, video flow, audio flow, or ancillary data flow.
So let's take a look. And we identified, the senders and receivers shall adhere to the IETF RFC 4566, which describes how to map media type parameters below into the syntax of a session description protocol object. Now,
Yeah, one thing to note is SDP files are not new. They've been around for a while. So this is not something that was invented for ST 2110 at all.
right. So should we take a bit of a closer look at what looks like just a page full of text if you're not familiar with these? But what I would recommend you do is spend some time, study them, because you will start to see patterns. You will start to see information that you're very familiar with from the world of SDI video. And if you can interpret these and understand them, these could be your best friend when it comes to fault finding, couldn't they, Steve?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
So let's take a look at this. And we'll start off with the header information, Steve.
Yeah, on top, one of the things that you'll definitely see that you'll sort of see is it says a lot of them will say dupe, and meaning that it is a -7 SDP file. And you'll see the primary and secondary, which are really the red and blue networks.
So there's the red or primary, and there's the blue. And as you look at them, they are actually almost identical, aren't they?
Very much. The only difference is the IP address of the video flows. In this case, it's a -20. One quick note is on that dupe. In this case, it says primary, secondary. It can say anything in there. I've actually made them to say red and blue, and as long as that's what's indicated at the bottom of the red or at the bottom of the blue, as long as it's the same notation, it works perfect. So you may see several different uh, notifications of the primary and secondary or the red and blue networks, depending on who made the SDP. So that's going to be sender dependent. So different senders from different manufacturers may do it different ways.
Right. So let's take a deeper dive into this then. And as we said, it comes from an RFC. So we're fortunately not the first people to be on the bleeding edge of this. And the session description protocol file describes a format information for reproducing video, audio, and ancillary data information transmitted in IP packets, multicast addresses, and information, etc. Now, the thing to remember here, this is not carrying any video, audio information, kind of content as such. It's the information relating to them, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, it's nothing but a secondary file, if you will, that tells you or tells the receiver how to connect.
And as we said, SMPTE 2110 stipulates that the information detailing the video, audio, and ancillary information is contained within the session description protocol file, but does not specify the transmission method. That's where the control system and NMOS and ISO 5 come in, isn't it?
Yes. So it could be in band or transmitted out of band. If it's transmitted in band, it's in the video audio flow. It's part of the video network. If it's out of band, then it's part of the control network, generally coming in on an RJ45 connector. I would say that 95+% of systems all use out of band control. Very, very few actually use in band control.
So let's take a bit of a deeper dive into this. So here is an example of a session description protocol file. And the first part to highlight is the source address. So that is the sender. And then we have details of the multicast flow for both the red primary and blue backup. And as you'll be familiar from some of the other sessions we've done, the multicast flow address can range anywhere from 224.0.0.0 to 239.255, 255, 255. Then you'll start to notice information that will be vaguely familiar to you as an SDI engineer. And the first one is the video format. So you can see here it's specifying that the width is 1920 and the height is 1080. Sounds like an SDI video resolution to me, Steve.
Most certainly does, Kevin.
And we also have within the session description protocol file information about the PTP reference. Because remember, unlike SDI video, 2110 is asynchronous, is going across as a synchronous network, and it has a completely independent timing, PTP. So here we have the reference clock indicating the grandmaster and also the PTP domain number. And as you'll see, this can actually be critical because some receivers do actually require this information and they need it to be correct, don't they, Steve?
Yep, some do. I'm not personally a fan of that, only in the case that if the BMCA happened to be called up where it switches from the primary grandmaster to the secondary grandmaster, this data would be wrong.
Oh, dear.
And you'd have to reconnect to make that data correct again. So that's one of the biggest reasons I'm not a fan of somebody actually parsing that field and actually using that field.
So there's other bits of information in there that any engineer who's worked with SDI video is going to go, I recognize that. There we have the color system, YCBCR 422. As I said earlier, we've got the resolution, 1920 by 1080. We've also got the frame rate. Now,
yes,
it's not straightforward telling us it's 25p or 60i, but you can work out what the frame rate is from those numbers.
Yep, that would be my side of the pond at 5994.
Bit depth, 10-bit. Transfer characteristic system, standard dynamic range. That could say HDR. It's, you know, this is nothing new to us as SDI broadcast engineers. And then finally, we have the color imagery, BT709. So as I said, if you spend a few minutes looking at examples of session description protocol files, you'll very quickly start to see there's a lot of information that you as a SDI broadcast engineer already know and understand and use for fault finding in your day-to-day operations. It's here. It's within the session description protocol file.
Yes. And a lot of these fields are defined fields that only certain values are allowed. And the values that are allowed for each one of these fields is covered in the appropriate standard. In this case, the ST 2110-20 standard would tell you what the allowable names are for these fields.
And that leads us nicely into the last line that we haven't talked about yet, which actually refers to 2110. And the first
Yes.
one talks about the packing mode, whether it's a general packing mode, so a GPM, or a block packing mode, that's a BPM. And that is going to be specified by the sender. The next one is the SMPTE standard number. Video is 2110-20. And then finally, we have the media type. So it's 2110, and that can be narrow linear, narrow, or wide. And we've talked about those before when we've talked about 2110-21, how the sender and the receiver have to expect to receive the packets within certain windows for them to be able to operate correctly, Steve.
Absolutely, Kevin.
So you've seen here that this is a -20. So this is the video. The same exists for the audio. So this can be a -30 or a -31. And one of the other ways to tell it in here is you're going to see the payload ID. And as you can see here, if I just bring this up and bring up the pointer, there we go. Here on the -20, we've got 96. Yeah, over here on the audio, we've got 97. And when I bring up the ancillary data, which is a -40, you can see here now that it's gone to 100. And for
Yes.
those of you playing around with JPEG XS, that has its own payload ID as well, doesn't it, Steve?
Yes, it does. The one thing to note, though, is the payload or the packet type is really what that field is can be anything from 96 to 128, or actually 127. So the norms are these numbers, 96, 97, and 100 for video, audio, ancillary data, but they can be any number that the sender chooses to use, or the setup for the sending device sets up and uses. The one thing that I have seen change around that nobody is absolutely using the same exact numbers on right now is the JPEG XS. I have seen two different numbers floating around for JPEG XS. So we're going to have to be a little careful in migrating JPEG XS into the 2110 world.